What's up, y'all, and welcome into the Jack Vita Show. I'm your host, as always, Jack Vita. We're back here in action on a Tuesday, May 9th, 2023. Last week, we had a great episode with Survivor winner Danny Boatwright, who is a big sports girl. So we talked some sports, and as well as her time on Survivor. She'll be back later this week. We're going to talk some more sports, so it should be a lot of fun. Going off last episode, we're sticking with the reality TV theme. We've got someone who came so close to winning Survivor in the year 2011. Wow, my goodness, 12 years ago. Survivor finalist who played college baseball and a great friend of the show, Albert Destrade. Welcome back to the show.
Glad to be back, Jack. Glad to be back. And yeah, it's so close yet so far.
We got one day we got to do an episode where we it's funny because I've had all these Survivor contestants on. We've never talked about Survivor together on this show.
Yeah, we can do it. It'll be like my own personal therapy again on your program. We get to dig into the why and the what, into why I was just so close from that $1 million and talk all things Jeff Probst. I'd love to do it.
And also joining us, returning to the show once again, is the uncle of Albert Destrade. Now, this man did not come close to winning Survivor. In fact, he hasn't been on reality TV before, but he had a great baseball career playing both in Major League Baseball and playing in Japan. He was doing a lot of stuff for the Tampa Bay Rays. He was doing their pregame, postgame show for over a decade. He formerly was on Baseball Tonight on ESPN. He's got a show on Sirius XM where he talks baseball, and he's been doing a lot of XM for a while. We welcome the Big O, Orestes Destrade.
Hey, Jack, and my nephew, my dear beloved Al D. Jr. there. I hope you're feeling okay, Albert. You sound a little raspy. I know you're under the weather, so it's good to have you on here, and it's great to be on with you again, Jack Vita. All things sports and mainly baseball, and good to see you again, kid.
Oh, great to have you guys back. It's a party. It's early in the season. Hopefully, we'll be doing some more of these. But right now, we're getting into May. Baseball is really picking up steam. Orestes, before we get into all of that, I know you had a really great experience at the World Baseball Classic. I thought you might want to share a little bit about your time.
I really did. I mean, my ties to Japan, are deep, dating back to my jumping over there from the Pirates in 1989 and being able to really flourish over there before I came, and led the Marlins home runs and RBIs in 93 and 94. And I ended up going back again after the strike in 94. So my tenure is long and deep. And then after I retired, I continued to go back and forth there numerous times. Obviously, COVID put a snafu on any American traveling to Japan, as was shown by not any fans at all. They closed down the doors to anybody really for the Olympics when they hosted that. So it was really neat that's opened up again as at the end of last year, which has also opened up a lot of opportunities for me to kind of re-engage, reconnect with Japan. That led me to being involved with TV Asahi and also some of the people behind the scenes of the WBC. In fact, my nephew was there at the game. I brought him up in that incredible game against USA. So I was able to be at their practices on Sunday and then watch, the couple of games I was on. To be candid with you, I was glad the U.S. knocked out Cuba. Until Cuba is free and a free regime, I don't want them in the finals. So that's the way I feel about it. And so they knocked them out. Then I had to suffer through an incredible game on that Monday night where Mexico they were just looking so strong. I was surprised they beat Puerto Rico, and they went out and took care of that business, and then they almost upended, the powerful team Japan. Japan had a comeback of the ages. When you really if you get a chance, if you're a diehard baseball fan, rewatch or watch that game because all the nuances that went on in that game, Ganda's plays, the strikeout throw him out between Kai at home plate and Ganda at shortstop, putting the tag for a double play against Team Mexico. Got this over the back catch later on, like around the 7th inning. His sacrifice bunt with 2 strikes, and then the sac fly, and then obviously the walk off by Murakami. Led to a historic Team Japan, Team USA finals that was just incredible. And I'll definitely let Albert, chime in. But in the end, I was able, because of my ties with them and how much it's really neat, by the way, Jack, because this victory, and I covered the 2006 World Baseball Classic for ESPN and 2009. So I've been around Team Japan winning those first 2, championships. But this one was really special because most of their coaches were contemporaries of mine. They were guys that I either played against and rivals or played with. So their manager, first base coach, pitching coach, third base coach, hitting coach, all my homies. And so when I got on that field celebrating with them and getting hugs from everybody, Shohei Ohtani was so happy to see me. Another one that I'm really close to is Yu Darvish. This was a true celebration. But I was able to bring Albert up to meet Watanabe, chairman of the board of Nippon Express, which is basically the Federal Express of Japan, actually bigger than Federal Express. It's huge. And they were there, and we went up to the suite and had a blast. But can't say enough for Team Japan. Can't say enough how well the World Baseball Classic was run. Can't say enough about Miami and the Marlins and that organization being well represented, by the way. Shout out to that organization for what a great job in hosting at Lone Depot Ballpark this incredible event. Albert, your take on that game?
Yeah, it was quite a remarkable thing. I mean, when we look at the state of baseball, guys, just Major League Baseball or the sport of baseball in general, it's an interesting time. Rob Manfred and his tenure or his regime is implementing changes, right? They're changing the rules of the game. They want to change the pace of the game. They're trying to do what? They're identifying what some of the other sports are doing, and they're saying, listen, we're losing certain demographics. We feel like the game of baseball needs to, tap into a new source of fans. Guys, this World Baseball Classic, I think, epitomized everything that is what makes the game of baseball great. I mean, Orestes and I had a chance to be in the ballpark for these games. Jack, the atmosphere and the level of play was absolutely electric. I mean, the intensity that the fans and the people engage following the tournament, it was honestly what I think Major League Baseball is yearning for, right? They wanted people who, I personally knew people who aren't even baseball fans who were tracking this tournament and paying attention pitch by pitch, game by game. It was really remarkable to see how fans showed up in droves to support their countries, how, even the games that I had a chance to go to, especially the USA versus Japan final, man, what an international showcase that was for the game of baseball. My uncle Orestes, obviously, man, he's a very still beloved figure in Japanese baseball. And it's incredible to see, Orestes' career in Japan ended, a couple decades ago. And it's still, you couldn't walk around that ballpark without seeing a pocket of Japanese fans yelling "Destrade," trying to get a picture with the, Orestes' signature move.
They call me over there. It's Ore-san, because they don't call me Ore.
Ore, man, it was outrageous, and honestly, you really couldn't draw it up any better than.
No,
I mean, Shohei Ohtani on the mound for the save, facing Mike Trout, arguably the two best players in the sport for the last. Half of a decade, really. Man, just what an absolute slam dunk victory for the sport of baseball and for Major League Baseball, really. And it was really special to be a part of it.
Yeah, we were pulling like 70 million people watching those Japanese games. Everybody in Japan was watching. Loved it. My question to you guys, before we move on to what's going on right now, is... I guess a comment. My one thing is, I think as big of a success the World Baseball Classic was, I feel like we're just kind of getting started with this thing. This thing can get bigger. It will get bigger. I think the one thing that hurt it nationally in the United States was that it was running at the same time as March Madness. Because March Madness, as big of a baseball fan as I am, March Madness is like the best 2 or 3 weeks on the sports calendar for me. I watch every single March Madness game. Now, there were a couple nights in between the weekends where you had like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and you could watch some of those World Baseball Classic games, but we had some really big games running opposite the NCAA tournament. Do you guys think there's any way that we could potentially have this tournament start maybe at the start of spring training before we start the regular season?
No.
Or, so I know Buster Olney, former coworker of yours, I think he suggested having it in the middle of the season. You take a break, or at the end of the season in November. Or are we kind of locked into this?
It's complicated, and we're locked into it. You can't do it too early because you'll be really jeopardizing. First of all, okay, so what do you do with, a World Series 2 teams that go into the end of October, right? And so then they're going to have very short little turnaround, and you're talking, let's say hypothetically, a dozen of those players are going to be, of those 2 rosters, if not more, possibly, engaged in that. So they're going to have to start throwing for real sometime in January, okay? And to speed up and get, into game-ready shape in February. I think they run it at the exact right time. It's convoluted. There's no doubt. You've got March Madness. You just can't get around it. But I think it could still grow and exponentially grow. The one thing that you have for the next 2 World Baseball Classics is 1 player, if not 3 baseball World Classics. That's stretching it out a little bit for him to be at that greatness, but possibly. So, why not, right? So you'll be, 9 years out? They're still planning to do it every 3 years now, or every 4? I can't remember now. It's just still
3.
Are they back? Yeah, because at first they said they were going to do every 4 and be even, odd to the Great World Cup. But now it's every 3. So you have Shohei Ohtani available, and to some degree Mike Trout. Obviously Mike's a little older and he's breaking down a little bit. He's still, he's come out this season already on House on Fire, right? So you have those 2 along with, a smattering of others, especially the Latinos that love to play in this tournament, right? And we saw some great ones. Rosarena going to Mexico, you name it, all over the place. They were phenomenal. Team Mexico. How great that was. So my point with that, and I definitely welcome what Albert thinks about it. You have no other time. You can't do it after the season. People are spent. You're only asking for troubles for pitching arms. You can't do it in November.
Could you start the regular season a week late every 3rd year?
That I would consider. Now you're getting into the sacrilegious fan, that is like, I love my, most of them, are just Cincinnati fans and all, these Chicago fans, you get into some delicate situations there with some older crowd that are going to be like, what? Don't you dare mess with baseball. And by at least April 1st, they were already screwed it up and putting it earlier, right? Because some people are pissed that they're starting in March. I'm pissed that they're starting in March. I was always an April 1st, Cincinnati's playing that first game, or the Cubs, and I'm also pissed that they even have allocated for Game 7s of the World Series. Like, it's on the schedule in November. That should not even be considered. Baseball is not a November sport. Baseball is the midsummer, fall classic. The fall classic, not midsummer, excuse me. But the bottom line is that by the time you get to November, you have to step back and let football do its thing, right? And March, you have that. I could see that's the only answer that I would have, would be maybe let them seep down and start the season 2 weeks later. And then you get around March Madness.
I would be on board with that, because
I would
personally, I've talked about this with Dave Sims privately, the Mariners play-by-play guy.
Sure.
Have you met Dave?
Phenomenal. Yeah.
Great guy. Yeah, Dave and I were talking about, we just don't understand, if you're going to start the season as early as you do, why do the Cubs play home games like the first week of the season?
Right.
Why do
Exactly.
why is Seattle playing a home game? Why is Cleveland playing a home game? Especially because you're not getting a great brand of baseball to watch. People aren't hitting very well. Like, we should
That's
be
useless.
Yeah, so if we're going to start the season as early as we do, I would try to have as many games in Miami, Tampa,
Yeah.
Texas, have those teams open the season with a nice little homestand.
Yeah, Arizona.
Yeah, and so if we're gonna do, push it 2 weeks back, the weather's gonna be nicer. I mean, it's May 9th right now. It's starting to feel like summer here in Chicago.
Yeah.
Huge difference from where we were 2 weeks ago. So it makes a big difference.
I think you're right, Albert.
Yeah, the time of year. I mean, it's at the end of the day, guys. Let's face it. They're Major League Baseball kind of started the World Baseball Classic to say, like, hey, we're America's favorite pastime. We're an international sport. There's always competition now. This isn't 50, 60 years ago where baseball was top dog. So, March Madness competes with you on the front end. The NBA playoffs competes with you on the front end too, right? We're in the middle of the NBA playoffs. We still have Major League Baseball games going on towards the the playoff push of September and October. We run into the NFL starting. So you're always going to have competition with other sports. But I think that based on the health of the players, you still want the best players to compete. Unfortunately, I think the one critique people had about Team USA is they didn't have a lot of the feature arms, right? A lot of the best pitchers didn't participate for Team USA for a variety of, cautionary reasons, right? Clayton Kershaw really wanted to pitch. The story there was apparently his insurers weren't really on the same page about letting him play. So the way that the tournament is most successful, Jack, in my opinion, is you need the feature players, and you have to create a schedule that accommodates those players. And what are they more comfortable kind of leveraging? Probably parts of spring training or even the early parts of the regular season. Really, the season isn't really dictated in April and March in Major League Baseball. The old adage is you can't win the division in April. I mean, you might be able to lose it, but you can't win it in April, right? So I think the way it's positioned now is correct, and I think that's just kind of competition is part of what it is in major sports.
The Tampa Bay Rays are trying to change that trend right now, though. You get winning the season in April and early May. Holy cow.
I figured we could segue into some regular season stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we almost have to, because, and as much as there's so many stories and great topics in the game of baseball right now, it's almost, no doubt historic, but it's almost like unbelievable. I've been around baseball for 40 years. Literally, I signed when I was 19 years old, and holy geez, I mean, this is I don't even get it. I mean, I will say this, and it was Albert who mentioned this to me. It was you who mentioned to me last week about the spring training thing, right? Your thought on was it you? Your thought on spring training as to why the Rays are off to the good start?
No. I hadn't heard this.
Wasn't you? Okay. Who was it I was talking to? Holy cow. Now I want to give the right props to it. But I'll think of it because I was having a conversation. I could have sworn it was with you. So here's the thought on this. The Rays, because of Hurricane Ian, had spring training where?
At the Trop.
At the Trop. I can't think of another team that had spring training in their home ballpark, and not just the half of the 30 some odd games that you play. Okay, that's massive, right? But all the training, all the preparation, you're at home, and then you start the season. There's no transitional period for said team. It's talk about their start being historic. That's historic, and I haven't really heard people talk about it, and it just kind of went under the where else were they going to train? In fact, there were talks about them going to the Braves complex, the Wild World Sports over there, when Braves obviously have now been over in Northport for the last couple of years since they built that beautiful scenario situation. But they didn't. They were at home, and they played a couple of games in Orlando, I believe, but in spring training, and they took their home games over there. But in fact, I think maybe only one, if I'm not mistaken. That is a major plus, and that brought their team together. on top of that, this is a very well, I mean, I'm not going to negate from how, having been inside of that organization, how well run this is, how well their structure. I think of only about 4 teams in the last 15 years or so, 20 years, and then one team even beyond that. That's the Atlanta Braves. 2 teams, the Atlanta Braves, the St. Louis Cardinals, the San Francisco Giants, the Tampa Bay Rays in the last 10 to 15 years and beyond have just figured out how to player develop, sign the right coaches. I don't think people realize how important it is to have the right coaching staff up and down your system that's professing the same mantra, right? And then that leads up to the major leagues, and then player development, scouting, statistics, obviously now with the advent of sabermetrics, and then how you're drafting properly, and then trades. I'll never forget, again, being on the inside with the Rays, how many GMs, the moment they hear that the Rays are interested in a particular player, they started wanting to pull them off the block of wanting to trade, because it'll be some AA dude that's hitting 263 or has a 4.1 ERA, and they're like, oh, we're interested in Julio Sanchez, Tom Jones over there in Iowa or wherever. They're like, this guy, because they turn into some superstar. And lastly, I'll add, where they don't spend the money, which is still the discrepancy is massive, where they don't spend the millions, they do spend it in international drafting and paying some of the top dollars. So that's how these teams kind of make ends. And by the way, they've done a great job. But it's interesting. I do want your take on what you guys think about having that advantage of being home for spring training.
Yeah, I think we forget a lot of times that Major League Baseball players, obviously, Orestes, you had a chance to play at that level. You're human beings, right? And there's a comfort, and there is a familiarity with being a certain place. I heard an interesting story a couple seasons ago of people talking about why the Seattle Mariners had such a difficulty landing free agent players, and you just don't think about it because you just to us it's Major League Baseball. They're on TV every night, but you don't realize it's not fun to fly from Seattle, Washington to go play a game in Tampa. And every one of those
pretty
flights,
much everywhere they go, they have to go far.
Right.
I'm going to interject real quick, Albert. I also want to mention, as you bring that up, I think the teams on the West Coast are at a big disadvantage now with this new balanced schedule, because now they have to make way more trips to the East Coast. I agree. There are 14 teams east of the Mississippi and only 7 west of Colorado. So you have double the amount of teams on the East Coast than there are on the West Coast.
Right.
Those West Coast teams, especially Seattle, I mean, that's going to play a factor in this too.
Yeah, it beats you down. They talk about, and now, everything in baseball, the beauty of baseball is every year we get more, we count things more. Baseball's always been a sport of counting things. One of the interesting things I heard about the shift going away was they calculated how many steps. So Austin Riley, third baseman for the Braves, obviously, Ron Washington talked about counting how many steps he's going to save just from not having to move over from the shift. Not playing in shallow right field and then having to run over the third base and back. It's like he cut out like 15 miles of pure running just over the course of the season. So think about it. If the wear and tear, they're talking about him moving around the field. Imagine the travel. Imagine moving around, stuff like that. So I think that's a really underrated point about how just having that familiarity, especially like a team like the Rays, which is like, I think that clubhouse has this whole like, we know we're the Rays, we know we're not the Yankees, we're not glamorous, and they build like this continuity factor that I think is different than other organizations, and it's been kind of a part of their success. But the Rays have spent a little bit of money, like said. They spend money on international draft, international signing pool. Wander Franco was the number one player in baseball, number one prospect in baseball, and they spent money on him, locking him up early to a pretty long-term deal. They actually broke their free agent record this offseason, signing Zach Eflin to the biggest free agent deal that they.
But we're not talking about massive deals. That's also in comparative of Major League Baseball.
Right.
It was what a $50-something million deal or something for
40.
40-something. It's not dramatic. Okay,
it's not.
It's not. And let's not get carried away with Franco's. I believe it ends up being if in totality, I think it was 190 something, but it could be up 218 or 200 and something slow, 229. I mean, give or take millions, right? But remember, the first 4 years of that contract equates to $18 million. The first 4 years, $18 million. So it's a very calculated contract where you're playing with a guy that right now, we already knew, even though he's already, he's gotten into an all-star season, and if he doesn't get hurt, you could see it, this kid in A-ball and double A and triple. It was ridiculous, right? So they knew what they were going to be getting for. So paying him 3, 2, 3, 5, 6 for the next 3 or 4 years, that equals $18 million. It's nothing, right? They would do it all day long. Heck,
it's a form of what they did with Evan Longoria, right? When the big dollars
to some degree, but even greater because of the back end is so massive. But why is the back end so massive? They're playing the game of, they didn't have this with Evan Longoria. They're playing, the reason they could add another $100 million, because Evan's contract was 100 and something, was because there is a carrot at the end of the deal, and that is a stadium. So that 4-year period runs you closer to the 2027, and the caca or get off the pot, basically. Hey, I stayed clean. Unless you're bilingual, then you're saying I'm good. Which I always laugh at that on American shows when people say things like, "Oh, you have the cojones," and I'm like, it's a bad word in Spanish. They'll say certain words in Spanish like it's not a bad word. It's a bad word, but most Americans don't know it. So they had the smarts to think, okay, that gives us 4 years at $18 million to keep one of the top ball players, a Acuna-esque type of ball player, for a lot less money, and then we can sign that big deal with the stadium, and now our value rises of the team. We're going to have all this extra money from revenues from a new stadium, because I don't care where they put it. The first couple of years are going to be honeymoon period, and then quite possibly, in my estimate, they'll do similar to a Loria and possibly sell the team because it's at an optimal scenario. So trust me, it's a very the best comparison is not Longoria. The best comparison to that contract is Giancarlo Stanton. When Loria signed him to a $325 million. I remember when seeing that for the first time, and it came up on my phone or whatever it was that I saw it. What? The Marlins? And then you really dissect the contract, and you realize that it was like $5 million, $6 million, $7 million, then $32 million. And he was long gone by that time, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah, and I think, going back to that point, I definitely think that playing in their own building for an extra month, huge. My question is, why not do it every year?
Well, it's not fair. So you can't. So what other teams can do that? You can't. Technically it's an unfair advantage, but it's a fair thing to have happened. Does that make sense? So it needed to have happened. They needed to go to play. Ian put them in that situation. It's a natural disaster. You can't say, "Oh my gosh, how come?" No, they have to play. They have to camp.
It's kind of like the Blue Jays. When they weren't allowed to play in their stadium because of COVID. It's like they got to play in this really home run, offensive friendly place.
Yeah, but it was still unfair for them because it was really unfair because they didn't have the same fan support. There was still a stadium that they don't know. Yeah, Buffalo was great because it jumped out. I played there. I hit 12 home runs in 2 months there, and so I know it. And but the bottom line is that this is totally different. It's almost like who wouldn't want to train at home. In fact, I don't even think there's let's go into all sports, major sports. I think in hockey, though. Well, I don't know. Yeah, hockey. What do they do with hockey spring training?
They work out at their own facilities, I think. I mean,
because it's all indoors and the weather doesn't matter.
Yeah, the Blackhawks have their training camp at the United Center. I'm pretty certain.
Right. I mean, if you're able to, that will make sense. So if you have a dome stadium, you would, but then you can't play everybody else. So it was no pun intended. It was a perfect storm. You know what I mean?
Oh, my question to you guys.
Somebody needs to write a book about if they go on and break the 116 game record. Somebody needs to write a book called "The Perfect Storm." All right, so Jack, I'm putting it on you. If they break the 116, the most wins in a season.
You'll get me access to all these people. To interview,
I will get you access to all the people.
The Mariners,
really, it's the scene of the set of the scene of the book and a movie would be way before during Hurricane Ian, and the storms hitting, unfortunately, and ravishing that coast, which was really, really sad when you think about it. You know what happened in Fort Myers and Naples.
Scary time too for people.
Scary time. It was really sad, and lives were lost and homes. But then you fast forward, Port Charlotte was not available. So it's something to think about when you go on, and then I'm going to lead us to some other, moving away from the Rays, but still in baseball. So they were, I think, better prepared. Fantastic. They are a fantastic, exciting team. But where the heck are all these home runs coming from? And obviously the Rays are at 70-something home runs, but just in Major League Baseball, everybody's just flicking. And I was a home run hitter, man. And I know that there's this ebbs and flows of you have the 80s and the late 80s and early 90s were kind of back to, they were dead ball area. I played in it. You know what I mean? I hit 20 home runs one year and led the Marlins with that. Freddie McGriff led the league with 36 that year. That's it. Guys, somebody's going to have 36 at the All-Star break. And I'm not joking. So, and then you go into the steroid era, right? When it rose, and then it went down a little bit again. And then I think that they tightened the balls somewhat. And think about it. Because of the move, and I want your guys' take on this. I think it's cyclical, but it's also thought pattern, okay? So why not tighten the balls a little bit when you're going to be having such a paradigm shift in the beloved game of baseball with reference to some, rule changes that are dramatic, right? They let seep in all these weird shifting and all these other things. So they've ruled that back, and now you've got the clock, which is incredible, right? And to think of that they were even going to do that, even though they practiced it in the minor leagues and it worked. You have the pickoff situation, you have the shift. So all of a sudden, in order to kind of like, take the eyes away from that in baseball, you tighten it a little bit, and you got more home runs. People are like, "Oh my God, my team hit 7 home runs today," and it takes them away from this new advent. That is a little bit kooky, though I believe it's working, right? But it is a little bit, the purists are like, what's going on with this time clock and stuff? Your thoughts on that? Because you almost have to kind of, make people think about some other things, and what better things to think about than home runs?
Yeah, I'll take that first. I think that's a really interesting thought that I honestly hadn't thought much about it yet, but it makes sense because it's like, what's up with Cody Bellinger hitting all these home runs again? What's up with, especially at Wrigley, with the wind's blowing in, it's cold outside. I did not think he'd be hitting as many. He probably has like 6 or 7 home runs already this year.
Muncie's crushing. I mean, there's guys that have power. There's no doubt. But we're talking, Albert, I mean, there's some home runs being hit, buddy.
Yeah, I think offensively, man, I think what Major League Baseball looked at and said, listen, how can we generate more casual fans into the game? And I think offense sells, right? People don't baseball purists, we might like pitching rules, but offense sells. There's been And I think they kind of overdid it with the ball being really juiced in 2019. I think that was like really the epitome of like the juice ball era kind of. And then they kind of scaled it back, and they've kind of oscillated back and forth, right? They want more offense, and then they're like, wait, we're going too far with it. And then they're like, okay, the pitchers are too good. We got to crack down on sticky stuff. And they're trying to like kind of have their cake and eat it too. I think this year, honestly, man, the game's been more enjoyable for me to watch on a couple things. I don't like some of the rule changes that are extreme. I don't like the batter getting ready by 8-second rule. I think it's kind of a.
I think it's dramatic. They need to relook at that. I think it's a little much.
It's misapplied.
I like the time clock, but I think they need to play with that.
Yeah, elements of the pitch clock I think are effective. I don't like the pickoff rule, but I got to tell you, the game is more watchable.
I like the pickoff rule.
You do like the pickoff rule?
Only because you needed to. It's almost like, when we played, and the coach is like, I'm going to force you guys to run. I'm going to give you the hit and run. There were some coaches that I had in college and also even in the minor leagues where, in order to get out of a slump or in order to get out of something, he would put the hit and run on, And I had a coach one time put a hit and run on me with nobody on base. So he was telling me, I need you to be more aggressive at the plate.
Yeah, just swing.
So I was looking at the signs. There was nothing going on. And I looked again. He goes, yeah. And he nodded. He goes, yeah, I want you to swing at this pitch.
Wow.
Okay. And I want you to swing with a hit and run aspect. Meaning I want you to get hard down, up the middle, or opposite. You know what I mean? And I tell you what, it got me ignited again. So I like the running. We had just gotten.
Oh, the stealing. No, the fact that stealing bases.
Oh, you're forcing them to run, Albert.
Yeah. Stealing bases is great. I mean,
that's the only reason that they're stealing. Really, because, if you think about it.
The bases are bigger, right? So the slightly bigger base is added. I think steal attempts are up 33%, which I think is great. Interestingly enough, their only success is only up about 4 to 5%, which I thought would be a little bit higher. But I think it's a more enjoyable form of baseball, Owen, Jack. I think that
I agree.
When guys are, now there's runners on base, it feels like they're going to go. There's more incentive. Also, as just as a general viewer, I watch a lot of baseball on television. I got to tell you, one of the worst things of the last 5 years was you'd be watching a game and a guy would just hit a laser up the middle, and you don't know as a baseball fan, is there just a dude randomly standing there, right? It's like you don't know where the defense is. But now the viewability of a game on television is back, where you're like, you see a ball hit off the bat and you're like, that's going to be a hit, which is what, I remember showing like an ex-girlfriend of mine who didn't know baseball, like baseball games. And they're like, a guy would just foul a pitch off and she's like, where'd it go? And I'm like, oh, that's a foul ball. Like, we can watch a game and know that like, that's a foul ball. That's a hit. Oh, that ball's going to home run. That's a pop up, right? Like, as a viewer, you should be able to see a ball off the bat and understand what's about to happen or should happen. Right. I thought it was anticlimactic when a runner on second, a guy hits a line drive that should be a hit, and there's just a dude standing in like
right there, on top of the bag.
Like, why is he there? That doesn't make any sense. So I think limiting the shift makes it more enjoyable to watch on television again from that standpoint.
Great point.
I agree. I think the pitch clock, one of the big reviews that I got from people when I was out at spring training, I'm texting my friends who are watching the games on TV. And personally, I think it makes for a better pace. But one of the things that my friends were saying was you can't pull your phone out during an at-bat. Like, unless you want to take a video of it. You don't have that time in between pitches to just, I'm going to see what's going on over here on social media. You have to be dialed in to watch it. And this is how baseball was played up until sometime in the 90s or 2000s, where things really slowed down. If you watch a game from the 80s, back when little Albert was growing up, I mean, that was it's a pitch. There was a nice rhythm. You could understand when the ball was going to come and when it was going to get thrown back to the pitcher, and it was this nice sequence. And we lost that sometime over the past 30 years, and now we're back to it.
100%. But I think the only like tinker I would do with it is I feel like I learned this recently. I don't know if you guys know this. So a lot of the violations that the umpires are calling, they're not calling it. They have a physical buzzer on them that tells them, hey, you have to enforce this rule. And I think that is actually counterproductive. I think we need when you played baseball, when I played baseball, who told you it was time to play ball? The umpire. All right, play ball. Let's go. Right.
Yeah.
I think the umpire needs a little bit. And listen, I'm guilty of this because I've been a proponent of the automated strike zone. I've always thought that I think we could use technology to help out things, I've tried to reduce the human element. But I think when it comes to the timeliness and the clock in the game, the umpire needs more autonomy. I think the umpire needs to be able to, I was at a game the other day, and Sean Murphy, catcher for the Braves, just takes a foul tip right off of his, just gets smoked. He's a catcher. Guess what happened? The umpire comes out, he cleans the plate a little bit. That's a part of the game. They can't just be like, oh, the pitch clock's on. Sorry that the catcher's on the ground.
Yeah, you make a good point.
Right.
You need to be able to have the umpire have a little bit of discretion of when does it start. Cody Bellinger, you're in Chicago, Jack, he first came back to face the Dodgers, and he got a standing ovation from the crowd. Guess what happened? They called a strike against him on his first pitch.
No, they didn't.
They did, yeah.
Because he was acknowledging the crowd, and he didn't get into the box.
And the clock had already started.
Right, so the hitter has to be at a, quote, ready position with 8 seconds remaining in the clock. That's, to me, is the worst rule of all of them. Because what is a ready position? If he's not ready and the pitcher's on the mound, just throw the ball. But yeah, like that kind of thing, to me, the umpire, because that's from the booth. The booth starts that, clock, so to say. So I think the umpire needs to be able to be like, okay, play ball, like give discretion for those in between things.
And there's also something else there with when you have a timeout, essentially, I believe both the pitcher and the hitter kind of have to consent to be like, okay, we're playing on now. That was an incident the first week of the season with Logan Webb and Tim Anderson, where Tim Anderson wasn't ready. Logan Webb delivered the pitch anyway, and then Anderson ended up getting out he didn't swing the bat. And so Anderson ended up getting ejected because he was unhappy with the ump. So there's little things there that definitely need some tweaking. I agree.
Cool.
They're getting better, though.
All right, so what was that, Albert? Sorry.
We're getting better. We're working on it. So,
yeah.
Well, one last thing I'll add about that. Remember, it's been put in effect in the minor leagues, as a test dummy, so to speak. And a lot of these nuances in the minor leagues, like you wouldn't have a Cody Bellinger coming up in the minor leagues, going back to his old team. So these are nuances that need to be worked out a little bit, and they'll take a note of it and go, okay, and they'll tweak that rule, accordingly. But you're right, there needs to be a little more autonomy for the umpires. But what else you got for us, Jack?
All right, I want to talk some American League West, starting with the Houston Astros here. The Astros have a losing record. They are, they're 17-18. This is their worst start to a full season since 2016, which is the last year that they did not make the postseason before they started this big run. That's excluding the COVID year where they had a losing record in 2020. They had 2 pitchers go down over the past week. Jose Urquidy, Luis Garcia, back-to-back days. Urquidy is probably going to be out for a while. Garcia needs Tommy John. Brandon Bielek, he gets brought up from the minors. He's been a guy who's bounced back and forth a little bit. JP France.
Yeah, he's been something.
Friend of the show. The first ever Major League player to make their debut on the Jack Vita Show before making their Major League premiere.
There you go.
So JP, good friend of the show. This was my favorite story of the week. Obviously, I'm biased. But Saturday night, he finally got brought up. He made his first start. It was out in Seattle. 28-year-old rookie, 5 years in college baseball at Tulane, transferred to Mississippi State for his final year, grad transfer, and then 5 years in the minors, 14th round pick, 99 minor league starts.
Right.
This is a minor league lifer finally getting his chance. Saturday night, 5 innings pitched, no runs, 3 hits, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts. Looks like someone who's going to get a nice opportunity here. Unfortunately, it comes at the expense of these guys getting hurt. That's the brutal nature of this business. You never want to see anyone get hurt. You will never want to see anyone have to undergo Tommy John or have these serious injuries. He's going to get his chance, though, here, it looks like. So I'm happy for JP. At the same time, the Astros, though, there's some question marks with this team. What's your read on the Astros, Albert?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, man. I think that they're a team that made some interesting decisions. Obviously, they let Justin Verlander walk during free agency. And if you look at their usage, Jack, it's a team that uses their starting pitching a little differently than other teams in Major League Baseball. Dusty Baker's old school, man. He lets guys go out there for the 6th, the 7th, the 8th in an era where guys are really, manage, especially that, knows in Tampa, they don't really let guys go through the third time through the lineup. Dusty's a little bit old school, and losing Garcia and Urquidy certainly is going to hurt their depth. They're going to need a lot more from guys like Framber Valdez, who have pitched deep into September and October the last couple of years, guys like Christian Javier, Hunter Brown, who pitched yesterday against the Anaheim Angels. Guys has absolutely electric stuff. Hunter Brown actually yesterday allowed his first career home run in 53 innings pitched. The guys has the makings to be really a frontline starter, just needs to develop a little bit more consistency. I think the Houston Astros are going to be okay. Jose Abreu's been a little bit of a disappointment in the middle of the order. There's a lot of talk about Michael Brantley coming back this week. He's a bat that really, really stabilizes that offense. Mauricio Dubon has stepped in place of Jose Altuve this season, but Altuve should be back. I wouldn't be pressing panic if I'm the Astros. This is the team that I still think has a really solid foundation. JP France is a guy that, really a lot of people inside of baseball are happy he's getting an opportunity. Overall known as a generally good guy and glad, obviously friend of the program. But I think the Houston Astros are going to be okay in a division that I don't think is that imposing. I still think the Mariners are a couple pieces away. The Rangers aren't a team that I'm really incredibly, high on myself. Obviously, everyone knows what's going on with Oakland. So I think the Astros are going to be okay. And I think here's a big one, guys, that really, we haven't really discussed today, but there's some sellers developing in Major League Baseball. We talked about you can't win a division in April, but you might be able to lose one. Teams like the Chicago White Sox might be lining up to be a potential trade partner with the Astros. The White Sox have Lucas Giolito. They have Dylan Cease. They have Lance Lynn. They have some experienced starters in a place that just isn't working. And I wouldn't be surprised if, the brain trust in Houston said, all right, what's it going to take for me to go get Lucas Giolito from the White Sox or go get, Dylan Cease, who's kind of underperformed this year. And Dylan Cease seems like a guy who just lines up perfectly with Houston, right? He's a strikeout guy, high spin rate guy who had some success before. I can see him being like kind of what they did with Garrett Cole. People don't remember Garrett Cole wasn't really Garrett Cole that we know now
Pirates, right?
Until he arrived in Houston, right? He showed some flashes of dominance in Pittsburgh, was a number 1 overall pick out of UCLA. But, once he got to Houston, that's when he really took off and became this like next stratosphere type pitcher. I can see a guy like Dylan Cease with like that, unbelievable plus stuff going to Houston. He's a logical fit for them. And he's a guy that I think could provide some stability and give him a big boost for a team that should be in the hunt again for a deep October run.
Well, I would say I think Dylan Cease is already there. I think Dylan Cease, he finished 2nd or 3rd in Cy Young voting last year. Like, this is one of
he's
the
legit.
best pitchers in the sport. Maybe he takes that step and wins the Cy Young. As for the White Sox, and we can touch on them, I'll just say, though, I live in Chicago. I would be shocked. No, not shocked. I would be surprised if they actually did sell. It seems very...
This has been a debacle.
I know. But when have the White Sox made these kind of decisions? When have the White Sox... They did
but they've been making some dramatic decisions, at least with their hirings of their managers and firing of their managers. And, they've just been trying so hard. And you seemingly have the roster over the last 3 or 4 years. Oh, my goodness. I mean,
we have a collection of talent that's really...
They should. I totally agree with you guys. They should. I'm just saying that they have to figure out...
order.
They have to figure out the front office. I mean, because
Rick
Hahn has been there for about 10 years now, and he got to do the rebuild 5 years ago when they traded Sale and they traded Adam Eaton, and they did that. Is he going to get a chance to do that again? That's the question. Is Rick Hahn your GM? Is your VP Kenny Williams, is he going to still be around? Or is Jerry Reinsdorf, who's known as just being a loyal guy? If you work for Reinsdorf, you sort of have a job for life. He'll find a way, even if you have to lose the position you're in, he'll find another position for you. Is Reinsdorf actually going to make those decisions? Because I think that's where it all starts from. Are you going to allow Rick Hahn to take this team through another rebuild? Are you going to pull the plug on Rick Hahn? And I just think there's so much uncertainty in that front office right now. I don't know if they're actually going to move forward and make those trades at the deadline and be a seller, because who's going to be running this team? And some believe that Reinsdorf is going to sell the team within the next 5 years or so. So I could see Jerry being that loyal guy who's like, I'm going to keep these guys around and then I'm going to sell the team, and then someone else can come in and they'll bring everybody on board. So it's
Possibly.
it's such an unstable situation. Anything they do.
Well, but I mean, we're not talking about a complete, unloading of the ship. I mean, but guys like a Cease, who was underperforming a little bit right now, but I mean, we know he's dramatically good. I mean, he's put his name there in the American League as one of the top, handful of pitchers. That could be, Houston, that could be an advantageous thing, because Houston's got so much young talent too. I mean, think about this kid Dubon, think about, a bunch of other young guys,
Kyle Tucker's a blooming superstar.
Kyle Tucker is a quiet star. By
David
the way,
Hensley is another guy who could.
Kyle
develop.
Tucker from Plant High School, where my daughter now goes, right down the street from where I'm at right here. He's I don't know if they were teammates, but they're from the same high school. And Albert probably would know better than I, because you guys know all this, kooky stats. But Kyle is how old compared to New York Met Alonso, because they both came out of the same high school.
Probably both 26 around that age.
And then they probably played together. And then they would have played together at Plant High.
Tucker was a high school draft pick, and Alonso went to Florida, so he might be maybe a couple years ahead of him. But yeah,
he might have been a couple years. I think he's a couple years older, so they might have missed each other there, or kind of, he might have been a varsity as a sophomore when Alonso was a senior, somewhere thereabouts. But both super talents. Yeah, and just getting real back to Houston.
Yeah,
as it's a microcosm of where they're at, but I can't at all be too concerned. Jose Abreu, who's hitting 225 with not only 14 home RBIs in 35 games and 138 plate appearances, but 0 home runs, 0. And I that is not going to continue, nor is the bad play or, the under 500 play of the Houston Astros. I just don't see it. Yes, there is a real concern of their pitching, but they're one of the, the stronger, minor league systems, along with a couple, the aforementioned teams that I mentioned. Baltimore's minor league system is dramatic. There's a handful of others. But I will say this: what the heck is going on in Major League Baseball right now, when like the top teams, as much as MLB we were talking about, they want to promote, all the excitement and stuff. Where is St. Louis? The pretty team of baseball, kind of Midwest beloved team. Where is Houston? Where are the Yankees? Where are a handful of these like legendary teams, when the top teams in baseball right now are the Rays, the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Baltimore Orioles? It's a little strange, isn't it?
Braves.
Well, yeah, the Braves. The Braves are thank goodness for Albert's Braves. Thank goodness. They're the ones that bring the everything back into play a little bit.
Well, I'll tell you this.
For
Jack,
the Braves, what the hell is going on?
Here's my take on that. And again, I'm always fascinated by the art of team building. Tampa Bay's put a masterclass on. Probably the only team that I can't even track what they're doing.
The Dodgers, by the way, I didn't mean to throw that.
Dodgers
have rebounded, and at least they're atop of a hodgepodge, NL West.
But let's think about these teams that you just mentioned, Orestes. Let's think about these teams. What do these teams all do, right? The Braves, before they started their Division I, they absolutely bottomed out. They sold everybody. They were in last place. They were terrible. Baltimore Orioles absolutely bottomed out, and I agree with you, Orestes. I think they have arguably the best, farm system in Major League Baseball.
Dramatic.
A lot of these teams, Pittsburgh Pirates, absolutely recycled. The most dangerous place to be in Major League Baseball is in the middle. And that's the problem with the White Sox, right? When you're not fully going for it and competing, and you're not fully all out, the Astros famously did it, right? Where they just got rid of everybody, sold everybody, tanked, and then they just compiled draft picks and, brought in Carlos Correa, got Jose Altuve, made move after move after move. That's why I think the White Sox should be concerned, because they're a team that's in the middle. They have a competitive team. They're not just, they have a bunch of big names, they have a bunch of really good players, but it's just not working. That combination isn't working. So to me, that's the most fearful place to be, is like, you never want to be in the middle. And, even some of these teams, the Cardinals, man, I thought the Cardinals would be a lot better.
What is going on?
But it looks like they might be in the middle, and being in the middle is bad. You don't want to be you either want to be really, really good or really, really bad. You
like
want
the middle child. Malcolm in the middle.
Yeah, those middle teams end up always kind of, you're stuck in
really
neutral.
Strong point. Cleveland has kind of been in that,
They're kind of in the middle. The Minnesota Twins.
I don't know about Cleveland. I like Cleveland.
I like Cleveland too, but
the Brewers. Brewers
Cleveland
had
the youngest roster.
They did, yeah.
Youngest roster in the league last year. Had one of the best records in the second half. They're off to a 4-star.
They were impressive in the second half last.
They have a lot of really good young players. They haven't hit yet. I think they'll hit better as it warms up. I'm not too concerned about Cleveland in their division. I think they are trying to win.
Look at Cleveland. If you like them, then take this. Ken Williams and Rick Hahn in Chicago can learn from this. What did Cleveland do with Francisco Lindor? They traded him, right?
Exactly. Yes.
And they were in the middle of their competitive window. They decided to trade Lindor, decided to let Corey Kluber
Bauer.
They traded Bauer.
They traded Bauer. They traded Kluber.
Right.
They
Clevenger.
Their other they've kept
Clevenger.
They traded Kluber. They traded Clevenger. Right. They traded Bauer.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they picked some certain people to keep. They kept Jose Ramirez. They brought in some pieces. And they were able to stay kind of competitive in the middle. And I think that the White Sox could probably take a page out of that book and say, all right, listen, let's core up a few of these guys. Let's, sell off a few others.
At least a couple here and there to try to build your farm system a little more. And
especially in that division, the AL Central isn't exactly, this isn't the American League East. That's
the only thing that keeps you thinking, don't give up. When you're talking about that middle point of the NL Central and AL Central, which is, coincidentally in the middle of the East and the West, it's like, if you just have a hot second half, look at Cleveland. I thought nothing of them the first half of last year, and they snuck in and they got in there, and then they beat the Rays, in a dramatic game there that went 900 innings. But
let's not forget Cleveland won 92 games last year.
I know.
I would not put Cleveland in the middle.
No, I mean, as far as like a team that I don't expect them to ever go far in the playoffs. I just don't. They're like the Sacramento Kings. They're a very good team. But I'm not putting them getting far in the playoffs. And this was a great example, and without getting into the NBA, but when you really watch the dichotomy of true pressure playoff, because the uniqueness of baseball is when you get into the playoffs, that's when you're really, truly, the neat thing about baseball is that you can follow the ebb and flow of a season better than any other sport, because it's so many games. I call it a soap opera. It really is. There's so many dun dun dun. This week this happened. And forever for the 12 years I was with the Rays, I would jokingly call it, "These are the Rays of our lives." So it was like, and I would say that on the air, and people were like, they loved it. It was like the Rays of our lives, because how many times did we go like this? This team's a little different this year. They're off to a dramatic start, but I hear what Albert is saying about that middle of the pack thing. St. Louis, let's talk a little bit about St. Louis. What is going on with that?
So St. Louis just made, this is the kind of big news of the week, is Willson Contreras will not be catching for them for the foreseeable future.
You just brought him in.
They gave him a 5-year deal, and I'm honestly...
He can hit, but I thought he could catch too.
No, he can't catch. I shouldn't say he can't catch, but...
You've been spoiled. Those in the Midwest, you've been spoiled with one, goat of a catcher, and Yadier Molina.
Yeah.
I watched this kid with the Cubs. I don't know about he can't catch. There's just some problems going on of him adjusting to the new pitching staff and all that.
Well,
last year,
there was a lot of stuff last year about teams that were interested in trading for him. the Astros were close to making a deal, and then they were interested in signing him as a free agent, and they were going to play him in the outfield. They weren't going to catch him.
No, he can hit. That's for damn sure.
He can hit, but that tells you a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
that's one of the smartest teams evaluation-wise. No one traded for him when there were a lot of teams that needed catching. He didn't have from my understanding, he didn't have a super vibrant market this past winter. I mean, there were teams that wanted him as a DH, wanted him to play outfield. So I was very surprised that the Cardinals, going from the gold standard of defensive catchers, go to a guy who there are some question marks here. And like I said, I wouldn't say that he can't catch. He has the tools.
Midwest appeal there.
It felt like a spite move to me. It felt similar to the Fowler signing, where it's like, we're going to pull this guy from the Cubs. He clearly wanted to go there. He wanted to go there more than anywhere. He wanted to play the Cubs. Last night, he was really taunting the fans, and he's going to enjoy being this villain playing against the Cubs for the next 5 years. But this is a guy who there have been concerns about his pitch framing, his ability to call a game, and his limitations when it comes to working with pitchers. So I've got some statistics here. Last season, the Chicago Cubs, now granted it's early, okay? Last year, the Cubs were 20th in ERA with a 4.00 ERA. What did they do over the winter to make their pitching staff better? They added Jameson Tyone, and he hasn't even pitched.
That's it.
It's not like they've had some dramatic shakeup. They went from having Contreras as their primary catcher to now Yan Gomes and Tucker Barnhart, who are two of the most respected veteran defensive catchers in the league and working with pitchers. That was a significant improvement. So they went from a 4.00 ERA to a 3.33, which is second in baseball to the Rays. Now, the Cardinals last season, they had the 10th best ERA in baseball, 3.79. Their ERA
at this point of the season.
Well, for the whole season.
For the whole season, okay.
For the whole season, yeah. Now, through their first month, and again, small sample size, there are a lot of other, this isn't just an independent variable, there are other things. And the Cardinals pitching staff is a little different from the way it was a year ago, but not significantly so. There's no more Jose Quintana, but they only had him for 2 months. So the Cardinals, their ERA is almost up an entire run from 3.79 to 4.49. So they now have the 19th best ERA in baseball. My question to you, as someone who played this game, how important is a catcher and his ability to work with a pitching staff, call a good game? Part of it is the unit, like a Molina, and how good he was with that. How much value should we be putting on that versus, hey, here's a guy who might not be great at those things, but he can hit?
Yeah, no, it's dramatic. We most recently we've seen it with Gary Sanchez and the Yankees. A guy who could hit and was a noticeably deficient catcher. And finally, they had to move on from him. I think personally, in my tenure of playing, I played with a Hall of Fame catcher in Japan in my almost, my 5+ years in Japan, who was just incredible. An average hitter, 250 hitter with not, a decent little power, but my God, his name was Ito. Could he frame, catch, pick off, was kind of like the heart of our team, though he wasn't even close to being the best all-around athlete, of which we had myself and 2 other Hall of Fame guys that, took that mantle. But he was the glue, I would say. And we had an incredible pitching staff. But when he was out, it was noticeable. And he wasn't out much, but there was a couple of times in my 5 years that, he got nicked up and whatever, and Ito had to sit out, and you did realize it. Played with a guy like Benito Santiago, who, could block, had one of the greatest arms, and I think he was, special. And you saw him jump around and everywhere that he went, Toronto, the Giants when they went to the World Series. Benito was an impact catcher. So I think it's important. I didn't realize how that our boy Contreras was in that Gary Sanchez level. I really didn't. I can't say that I watched that many Cubs games. I just know that I thought he was always gutsy behind the plate and was a raw guy. And then offensively, he's a beast. So it's
and when he came up, as a prospect, he was a lot of people believed he would be an elite defensive catcher.
That's what I remember hearing. I mean, again, it's not, a team that, and I'm more of an American League, especially, in the last dozen years being with the Rays, so didn't get to see him as much. But
I think people looked at the tools and the ability and the physical gifts of what this guy could be, but there's more to it than that.
Oh, yeah, at the major levels of the day-to-day and calling the game.
Pitch framing, which is not an athletic trait. It's a different.
I'll give you the lesser of the Molinas, because you obviously have Yadier, Benji, but Jose stuck around. Joe Madden swore by Jose Molina, and he was hitting $190, his last couple of years. But my goodness, would he be in there about 2 or 3 times a week? And the way that he, massaged the game and developed those young pitchers. Remember, the Rays are always turning over call-ups and call-downs and options. So, you need a guy that has the patience and the know-how. So, yeah, that's an interesting thought.
Albert?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I was kind of close to, I don't want to say shocked, but I was very, very surprised when Willson Contreras was not moved at the trading deadline in July last year. I think, again, we talk about, not being in the middle. The Cubs were not a team that was competing. It was an expiring contract. It was pretty obvious they weren't going to bring him back. So, there is no incentive to keep a player like Willson Contreras who's about to be, walk in free agency.
Well, you do get a comp pick. So
yeah, you get a compensation pick. Right.
What are you being offered versus do we like the comp pick?
Right. And that is a good point. Again, baseball's probably the sport of all of the big ones where a first-round draft pick has the least, weight compared to football, which is massive, or the NBA. But, I thought it was interesting when he didn't move last year because I thought he could have helped a few contenders, the Astros being one. And then now as he comes into the Cardinals, you sign him for 5 years. I thought this was actually a really good signing for the Cardinals. I was like, catching is the catching position at Major League Baseball isn't as deep as it used to be. And guess what? I think it's almost as important as it's been in many, many years. There's a lot of information out these days. So hitters are being solved and pitchers' repertoires are being, kind of like curated specifically to this is how we get people out. So the guys are really good at game planning, really good at pitch calling or game calling. Matter. And again, stolen bases are way more important, way more effective and valuable these days. So having an important catcher matters a lot. I thought the Cardinals made a great signing by him. And now, the rumors are that Adam Wainwright and Jack Flaherty got together and had a part in getting Willson Contreras moved off of the catching position. That's a big statement when a guy like Adam Wainwright speaks against, your case as a catcher. People are going to listen, and
Albert, that kind of stuff was happening in Chicago too. There were certain pitchers that did not want him catching for them. Darvish being one of them.
Right. Yeah. When there's that, when us as outsiders here and, the media or whatnot start to hear those rumblings, that's bad news because that means that there's definitely a major disconnect between the pitcher catcher relationship. That's just, it's funny. Oh, and Jack, you mentioned what's going on with the Cardinals. They're usually the Midwest darling of baseball. Everyone always considers the Cardinals fans to be just super gracious and kind. And this is the first time I feel like we've gotten some venom from that fan base. People are not happy with John Mosliak and what's happening.
Yeah.
It's 1 month of a struggle, and all of a sudden these really friendly, nice Cardinals.
It's a bad month, though, bro. That's 24 losses.
They've turned into some rough Philadelphia Boo-Birds. They are turning. The tide has turned quickly. This is
it ain't so. Say it ain't so.
It's a little bit of a different temperature.
Jack Vita, the Midwesterners. You guys are supposed to be the sweetest people in the world. Unless you're talking Cubs, White Sox, you're the sweetest people. Because I've gotten in a taxi and I accidentally said, "You're a Cubs fan?" And the guy said, "Get out of my Cub! Get out of my Cub!"
The salt of the earth is getting a little salty
50,
right now. Right? It's not good. This is not good. Man.
They'll throw you out of a cab in that town.
But no, it's interesting.
Not as Midwest nice as you think.
No,
they're nicer in Minnesota.
Yeah, Minnesota's sweet people. For that matter, Toronto is a great fan base and really nice, beautiful, great city. By the way, just to close off the catchers are very important to a team segment. That reminds me of 90s Bravos and their situation, which was, Albert?
Well, Greg Maddux always had a personal catcher where it was started with.
He did not like Javi Lopez.
He did not. It started with Charlie O'Brien, then it was Eddie Perez, and there's a lot of. It was always interesting in the playoffs, man. Javi Lopez would be hitting like 280 with 30 home runs, and it's like game 3 of the NLCS, and like it's just Eddie Perez back there hitting like 25.
But the dude that has 30 bombs.
Yeah, you just got Javi Lopez sitting on the bench because there's no DH back then. That's always been an interesting thing. The idea of a personal catcher. You mentioned 2 of the catchers that came over for the Cubs that are making a big difference: Jan Gomes and Tucker Barnhart. Jan Gomes, the guy, pride of Barry University here in Miami, Florida, where he was the Sunshine State Conference Player of the Year. Guys like that who can catch and are just veterans and can stick around for a long time. They eat in the big leagues for a long time, like Jose Molina and those type of guys.
No doubt. And deservedly so.
Deservedly so, man. And I think it's an interesting nuance of what's happening in baseball. The Braves made an interesting trade this offseason where they traded Willson's Contreras' younger brother, William. And people were like, why are you trading him? He was an all-star last year. And they brought in Sean Murphy from Oakland. And Sean Murphy has proven to be just an absolute elite, not just a defensive catcher, but offensive player. And I think that's kind of what they're doing now is the mantra of having like a 2-headed monster. It used to be like, it's kind of like the NFL. Yeah, it's kind of like the NFL, right? Where the NFL used to be like Emmitt Smith's our running back, but now almost every team has like a 2-headed monster at running back. And that's kind of what a lot of these teams are doing. They're finding, the Braves have Darnell and Murphy behind the plate as a combination. It's such an important
Toronto.
The Rays, Betancourt and Mejia really working out beautifully.
Betancourt and Mejia,
Toronto with Danny Jansen and Alejandro Kirk.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, Baltimore's different because they've got potential superstar, right, and a switch hitter at that. So you're not even.
Well, they still find ways for McCann to get in there. So what they do is they get Rushman. They get Rushman at the DH position, maybe at first a little bit. But having a 2-headed monster and having that depth at catcher is something that I think the better organizations have always done it. Even the Astros, right? Like, they'll build a great team, but they'll have a really good defensive catcher. Martin Maldonado be back there. There's a lot of emphasis in having somebody stable back there who can provide value through the pitching staff.
I got to ask Albert, because before we get going here, are the Atlanta?
Yeah, I got to ask you guys a couple more things.
All right, but I want to know from him because he is all things Bravos. We both guys are very talented in knowing all the things that are going on with the Braves. I'm more old school. I mean, not the Braves, but Major League Baseball. I'm more old school and inside as far as the X's and O's of having played it at that level, but. Are the Braves the best roster in Major League Baseball right now?
It's close. In the last week to 10 days, there's been a couple, negative news. I don't know if you guys saw today, but Max Fried was diagnosed with a tender left elbow. They said the MRIs came back negative, so he will not need Tommy John, but he's definitely going to be shut down for 6 to 8 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Which is a huge blow to the Braves. Wow. Kyle Wright, midweek last week, came out of the start against the Marlins with shoulder inflammation. So that's 2 of the big starters for the Braves. Yeah. Kyle Wright and Max Fried are going to be out. So without those 2 pieces, I think the dynamics change a little bit. There's a guy in AAA that you guys are familiar with. His name's Mike Soroka. Hasn't pitched in many years, but the Braves are going to probably look to him to get an opportunity now to come up and get some important innings. Alex Anthopoulos is going to have to maybe look into that trade market a little earlier. He's normally a guy who likes to wait until the wee hours of the trade market, but they might have to go get somebody earlier to supplant the pieces he's lost in the starting rotation. But The Braves, top to bottom, have a really nice nucleus. They have a great lineup 1 through 9. The back end of the bullpens are starting to get a little healthier. Raisel Iglesias just came back from early stint on the IL with shoulder inflammation, but starting pitching, man, that's important. That's been kind of the Braves' calling card the last few years. So losing Fried and losing Kyle Wright, who Kyle Wright led the National League in wins last year with 21 wins. That's going to be a big blow for that team. So they're, especially when you have teams like the Phillies, who just got Bryce Harper back, the Mets, who just got Justin Verlander back. You have these teams that are coming for you in your division who are not going to be, they're not just going to sit in neutral. That race to me is going to be the most interesting. I mean, the two East races, really, the AL East and the NL East
are ridiculous. You have
they're
almost every
two
team.
incredible races down the stretch, I think.
Yeah, good point.
All right, so, and I agree with you. I'd be more concerned about the Mets and the Phillies. I think the Phillies are hangover this season, but definitely going to be a difficult team to play. Okay, I got a couple more things. We touched on St. Louis. They're 12-24. Now, they've won their last 2 games. They got a 2-game win streak going. They got a chance here in Chicago to maybe get some wins back. Are you guys counting? Is St. Louis dead yet? Are they close to being dead? What's the pulse on St. Louis?
No, they're not dead. I mean, it's a rough start. I mean, but they're far from dead. This is when you have the pedigree and the overall still, intact roster that they have. I don't think that you ever count out a St. Louis. So what? They're 9 back. It's scary.
Yeah.
But Pittsburgh is,
Pittsburgh just lost 7 straight.
Yeah, Pittsburgh just won, and they snapped their 7-game streak. So, but that goes to show you how quickly, Pittsburgh can dive. If there's any the team in that division to be leery of is the Milwaukee Brewers. I think it's Milwaukee, not really super high on the Cubs nor the Reds. So I think the Cubs are, it'd be nice to think that they can be back in there. I don't think so. So I
Cubs
think
are in the middle. That's like an
the Cubs are truly a middle team. Talking about Albert's description of middle. Yeah, they're pretty much that. That's what they are. And St. Louis can turn this around. Let's say they reel off, 7 straight. Is that unfathomable for the St. Louis Cardinals to put together in the next month or so?
They won 17 just like less than a year and a half ago. They won 17.
They won 17 in a row?
Yeah, in September.
I didn't remember that. So, it's the little engine that could kind of scenario. That's the beauty of the marathon that is a major league season. Because not only do you have to putt and keep on, but obviously the other teams are getting bombarded with another. We have another game today? There's another game today? There's another game today? Yeah, there's another game today. So trust me, man. I mean, my first, true big league season of 153 games out of 162, I was exhausted, So, you learn how to do it, and that's why a team like the Cardinals, unlike a younger team like the Pirates, I think they're not done. Far from it.
Albert,
yeah, I don't think they're done either. I think that they if they're in the NL East, it'd be an uphill.
They're
climb.
done. They're done. And if they're in either East division, it's over.
Yeah,
right.
They're the worst
because
division.
Of who you got? Yeah, I'm talking about just to make the playoffs.
Right.
I think relatively speaking, they are still within arm's reach of being competitive in that division. Their roster is strong enough. Their pitching is shown that it gotten exposed a little bit. Adam Wainwright is, he's an older guy. Jack Flaherty's been he's been very volatile. When he's good, he's really good. When he's bad, he's really bad. They can still probably circle the wagons. I think I agree with it's really going to, in my opinion, it's really going to come down to the Brewers and them. The Cubs have played well early. Is Cody Bellinger's start sustainable? I don't know. I don't really think so. I don't know if their pitching really has enough. The back end of their bullpen is a mess right now. They're trying a combination between Brad Boxberger and Mark Leiter Jr. and Fulmer's been a disaster. There's talk about Alize coming in and becoming a closer, but their bullpen's kind of in disarray. I don't necessarily think the Cubs are a long-term competitor this year, but I think the Cardinals that's a winning franchise who knows how to make smart decisions. And I'm just interested to see which team is going to be the first buyer this year, because there's some there's some cuspy teams who can really go out and say, all right, who can we go buy from, the teams that are out of it? Because there's some clear teams that are out of it, right? The Nationals are out of it,
right?
The White Sox are out of it.
The White Sox are probably going to be sellers early. Oakland's going to sell whatever's. Oakland sell anything. They'll sell a cap out of their dugout. They're like, you want a hot dog guy? We got a great hot dog guy, Frank. He's the best.
They just sold themselves to Las Vegas.
Everything must go. So there's going to be some teams that have some nice clearance sales. And which of these teams in the middle are going to go get them? Is it going to be the Braves to solidify the rotation? Is it going to be, the Astros, the Cardinals? The Mets I expect to always continue to be aggressive. So which teams are going to be buyers and how are they going to position themselves?
And why? Okay, I know you have one more question, but I want to ask both of you guys. Why are the San Diego Padres, kind of just hanging around there and playing barely 500 baseball?
Well, they have an interesting situation with Tatis coming back. That's obviously going to be a little bit of a media circus.
Yeah, okay.
There's some of that. You got some of that. I mean, I think their team is actually kind of top heavy. If you look past the top four, they're relying on a lot of veterans like Matt Carpenter and Nelson Cruz, and I don't entirely love their lineup and their pitching staff. Blake Snell has not been good this year.
That one hurts.
Darvish is inconsistent. He's either great or he's not great. He's typically not in the middle.
I agree. I totally agree. I just don't get it because those are two great. Those are very good arms. One great, one good.
Well, the other thing that's weird is they had a guy like Ryan Weathers who steps in the rotation. He does well. And he gets bumped out once the rest of their staff starts getting healthy. Whereas, so now you got Michael Wacha in there, Joe Musgrove. Joe Musgrove's good. But then
great, but I don't even, is he back?
Yeah, he just got back.
Okay.
But so they got Musgrove back, and then, even the end of the rotation, they might be looking at a Cole Hamels as a guy who comes up later this summer once he's finished rehabbing his shoulder and pitching in AAA El Paso. So I don't think that their pitching is very good.
Right.
Yeah,
the lineup is top heavy.
I guess that's the main problem for them. Right.
It's a team that's supposed to be, an offensive juggernaut, but Manny Machado's really underperformed this year after being, the runner-up in the MVP last year. Juan Soto, since he's left Washington, hasn't really been
pretty. He's got a little hot here in the last week or so, but you're right. It's been subpar.
Nightingale reported 2 weeks ago that San Diego is concerned about Juan Soto, and they're going to be players for Ohtani this winter. Yeah. If they land Ohtani, they may trade Soto.
Trade Soto to get
before
Ohtani.
That contract's up because they're not going to re-sign Soto.
Right.
But now they're going to be.
You're counting on Cole Hamels at 39 years old. You're in trouble.
Yeah, you're counting on Hamels.
Come on now. But I just wondered because they're a team that intrigues me. It's not like I'm a big fan of the Padres. I tend to be more in the West, to be more of a Dodger fan per se.
And what's funny? They're in a really interesting spot because they've committed so much money and they've made so many aggressive trades and they've added so much that if it doesn't work with this nucleus, the future will be very difficult for them because they don't have a bunch of prospects coming. They don't have a bright future, right? It's almost come to me kind of funny. It reminds me of the first iteration of AJ Preller's, tenure there, where he made the big splash where he traded for Craig Kimbrell and Justin Upton and added all these big names, Bill Myers. And he's like, wow, the Padres are going to be incredible. And then it just didn't work. And then they were really bad, until Tatis came through, until they, even Machado was kind of a weird sign for them. You're like, they weren't really ready for Machado when they got him. And then all of a sudden it was like, wait, okay, they got Tatis, and now they're like have Xander Bogaerts, and now they have all these like, big names there, but it could get ugly for them in a hurry if that group doesn't click together, because they're all of their eggs are in this basket right now. Like they're fully committed. Their chips are in the middle, so they really needed to work with this group.
And what's funny is we mentioned our buddy Cole Hamels. They've picked up a lot of guys like that. Like if I was looking at who's played in AAA for the Padres the last 2 years, Robinson Cano. They just picked up Jose Iglesias. Julio Teheran is in AAA with the Padres right now. The El Paso Chihuahuas, baby.
A former Rays all-world prospect's been one of their key bullpen arms, Brent Honeywell, right? They have a lot of like reclamation projects.
What a wonderful what a great kid that guy is.
He's finally found himself a niche in the big leagues after being like the consensus all-world #1, pitching prospect. He's pitching like seventh and eighth inning for them, and a lot of guys like that, a lot of reclamation type projects.
Yeah, Rougned Odor, Nomar Mazara.
They're all in AAA.
Well, they've all been in AAA. Like Odor's at the major league level now, but I'm pretty sure that was a minor league deal. Yeah. And even if he wasn't, it's a reclamation project. Nomar Mazara is another one. I know they.
Doesn't that seem like too much? Because don't you want to be developing players?
They've been emptying out the tank on.
They've been emptying. You're right, because they've been giving up all these guys in order to sign certain players or trade.
Personally, another thing about that, I talked to Cole, I talked to Kyle Kendrick, I talked to Ben Francisco, and they all said the same thing about what made those Phillies teams different that they played for. Not only were all the players tight, all the wives were tight, the kids were friends with each other, there was a different team chemistry with those teams than with other teams that they played for. And my opinion is you typically aren't going to have that same kind of, it's harder to establish that kind of team chemistry when you're just pulling up, parts from other organizations, when these guys aren't coming up through the farm system and spending a lot of time with each other.
Right.
So that could be another part, team chemistry.
They're as they would say, they are on the clock.
They're on the clock. Okay, my last thing I wanted to ask, because we teased AL West at the start, and we didn't get too deep into it, but that's fine. We can talk more next week with whoever our guest is. But I want to know kind of, we touched on it. None of us are overly concerned about Houston. However, I will say, given Houston's start, because Houston won this division by 15 or 16 games last year up on Seattle. And I know Seattle's off to a slow start, and Seattle, their offseason acquisitions, none of those guys have really given them much of anything offensively. Teoscar Hernandez, he's got a 416 OPS. Or sorry, that's his slugging.
Really? Wow.
Slugging, yeah. Okay, I got that wrong. Yeah. It's sometimes you see a slash line, and I'm like, what is that? But he's batting 226. He's got 267 on base. Colton Wong, he's batting 188. AJ Pollock is batting 153. Cooper Hummel is batting 087, and then Tommy La Stella just recently got released with a 190 average. So none of the new guys that they've brought in yet have made a significant contribution and made this team much better. At the same time, however, Seattle did not play well the first couple of months last year, and the difference between last year and this year was that Houston was a juggernaut. They won 106 games. I think Houston is still the favorite to win this division, but I don't think they're going to be running away with this division. I think, the Angels are interesting. Texas, I'm not entirely believing it, but
believe Texas, baby.
They have a plus 86 run differential.
Believe Texas. They have put together a roster.
You believe in the Rangers, huh?
I am a Ranger believer. I lately I've been watching them and kind of really keying an eye on them and going, wait a second, this could work. And I'm very intrigued by the Texas Rangers, man. And they've got a lot of young arms in there that I think are going to really impress. And then they brought in the veteran arms, obviously with the signings, but I just watch out for Texas. I think this might be their year of a really good mix of veteran starters with some electric young arm bullpen, relievers, and then offensively it's been fun to watch. I mean, they got one of the most electric outfielders, hitters in baseball, man, with that kid Garcia. I mean, holy cow. So yeah, Alolis is the real deal, and quietly,
El Bombín.
Huh?
His nickname is El Bombín.
El Bombín. So this is an interesting little team. Watch out.
Well, Albert needs to give a rebuttal because earlier he said, I don't believe in Texas at all. I think they're in the middle.
Yeah, I think the Rangers are what intrigues me about them is they have some interesting pitching in their minor league system. I think pitching is really what they're at a deficit at. Jacob deGrom obviously was their big splash, but man, he's so tantalizing when he's healthy, but he's so often injured, and he's really needs to be a cornerstone for them to compete. I like to see, they have some interesting guys. They have, a couple of the top. They have Jack Leiter in their minor league system. Kumar Rocker's been throwing the ball really well. They have Cole Winn, who's I think is going to be a really nice starting pitcher down the road for them. I think they're a couple years away. To answer Jack's question though about the Mariners, man, they have some really nice pitchers. They have, George Kirby and Logan Gilbert, and Luis Castillo's been phenomenal. But you look at that offense, and to me, it's not, it's just Jerry DiPoto, man. He's been aggressive on the trade market the last few years. He's been a swashbuckling guy, just trading and adding and subtracting. But I think they've missed the mark with what wins in today's baseball. And look at that lineup. It's just how many guys there have an on-base percentage under 300, on-base percentage under or around 300.
Yeah.
It's just paltry. They don't have guys who get on base. Julio Rodriguez, who's supposed to be the face of the franchise, has gotten off to a slow start.
They did that last year, though. He did that last year.
Right. Jared Kelenic has actually been probably their best offensive player and is finally I guess I say finally. I mean, he's like, he's 23 years old, but he's finally coming into his own as what the offensive prospect they thought he'd be. But
Mario Lanza, friend of the show, friend of Albert and mine, huge Mariners fan. He said that it's like Jared Kelenic and Julio Rodriguez have swapped bodies.
Yeah, right now. Exactly. That's interesting. It's what's happened, but it's just, man, if you look at that lineup, it scares me because they have a lot of low on base percentage guys who are, Gino Suarez is a guy who's going to hit for power, but he's going to be a 200 average, 290 on base guy. You have Teoscar Hernandez is really a traditional on base guy, Colton Wong. So you're going to struggle scoring runs when your team gets on base at that kind of a clip. And it's like, even Juan Soto in his struggles in San Diego, he was hitting 180, but his on base was 375. Like the guy's still getting on base, so he's still able to score runs. They have a lot of issues. Cal Raleigh, who's another power bat for them, not really an on base guy. They just have a bunch of guys that don't fit to me in terms of creating runs the way that the best teams in baseball create runs. The Astros, those type of teams. They don't have guys that get on base a lot. The Rays, man. Think about why they score so many runs. Like, made a good point. Like, the home runs are a surprise, but the Rays always kind of had some on-base dudes. Like Yandy Diaz gets on base. They always have guys who give you good at-bats. The Mariners are kind of
Harold Ramirez. Phenomenal over the last 100 so odd game.
Right. They're almost like the anti-Rays offensively. They just have a bunch of guys that give you quality at-bats. And that to me is scary because you have to be able to score runs. They're pitching. You're just putting too much pressure on a young pitching staff. They got some good pitchers, but you're putting too much pressure on a young pitching staff if you can't score runs.
But I will add this because it will circle back to the Contreras segment and comments. Jonah Heim, the Texas Rangers, is off to a dramatic start. So remember, the spine of the game is very, very important. And Jonah Heim is a youngster, but a phenomenal. Have you seen this kid catch?
He's great.
Holy cow. His release is just dramatic. And he's like 6'3", 6'4", built. I mean, he's a behemoth and can pop. So I'm going to hold strong. I'm not expecting him to run away with it by any stretch, but I'm going to hold strong with my Texas Rangers being in the mix there deep in the season. So.
Corey Seager should be back soon too, man. That's
Corey Seager. So when you're talking about the spine of you've got Contreras, in center field, and who's a phenomenal defensive player. You've got Heim, you've got Corey Seager will be back soon. This is and obviously you added Marcus Semien. So this is an offensive team that could be interesting, and they call up some of those young arms with all the veteran starters. It could be interesting.
Well, I'm just going to say it right now. You've got Texas 21-13, Angels 20-16, Houston and Seattle 17-18. Right now, I think any of those 4 teams can win the division.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see the Angels make a push with the greatest player in the world.
What's great is when he says that, we don't know who he's talking about.
That's a great point, because as I said that, I go, wait a second, what about Trout?
You're like the greatest player in the world, and Mike Trout too. But it could go the other way. It could be the greatest player in the world and Shohei Ohtani.
No, the greatest player in the world is Shohei Ohtani, because you just can't do what he's doing. And the greatest everyday. So you just need that one word, everyday player. But wait a second. Shohei plays every day too, but no, you know what I mean. That's not a pitcher, is Mike Trout, and he's reproving that again this year. But
boy, it'd be fun to see them in the postseason, though, right? And
that's what I'm saying. I think it's interesting that we started with the WBC, and we're going to probably end to some degree back to the WBC, because those two guys, made the WBC, and along with so many other aspects of the well-run and well-presented WBC and produced, so to speak. It's interesting, we're in the midst of the NBA playoffs, and you've got Kobe, God bless his soul. You've got LeBron James, up against, Steph Curry and some of, other great, the Joker. And there's certain things you want, right? And you need to perpetuate the excitement of this day and age that we live in, that is very, give me some excitement right now. I need it now. Man, would that be cool to have the Angels, in the playoffs and have the talents of Trout and the great Shohei Ohtani being, front and center.
Yeah, think about that. Baseball's the only sport, really. Now you mentioned that, and Jack, think about this. Probably the only sport that hasn't had one of the top 3, players in the game at the biggest stage in several years, right?
You pulled him away from it, because even Harper. He was there several times. He wasn't there when they won, but he was at the precipice of it, and he was there last year. Again, though he hasn't won, but he's.
You haven't had Ohtani, you haven't had Trout, you haven't had Judge, you haven't had really the top flight.
Yeah,
guys.
I mean, Judge gotten to the mountain top, to the mountain side, so to speak, but he hasn't climbed up over the top. But you need to get one or more of those guys, facing off each other. Can you imagine, hypothetically, and if we had to finish out and say, okay, who's going to be in the World Series? I don't see it being Angels and the Phillies. But if you had a matchup of Shohei Ohtani against Bryce Harper, I mean that's monumental.
Yeah, I mean,
of course, I can't say that because I'm getting in trouble as we leave the show with one Albert Destrade, because he's already biting his tongue right now going, what are you talking about? Maybe Shohei Ohtani versus Ronald Acuna Jr.
Oh, yeah. Listen, I'm just hoping Shohei Ohtani stays in the American League West and doesn't come over to the Dodgers or the Mets or whatever.
Well, that'll be for next year. Yeah, he's going to be in a World Series, and it's not going to be with the Angels. It's going to be with somebody else. And I'm hoping he goes to my original major league team called the New York Yankees, because that's where he belongs, because he is the reincarnate of Babe Ruth. And where did Babe Ruth really make himself famous? The New York Yankees. Case closed. Yes, I'm a Yankee fan.
I've heard. I don't believe he's going to the East Coast.
I know. A lot of people don't feel that way.
It's gonna be West Coast. Maybe Seattle gets in there. Maybe
Seattle is not going to get in there. Are you kidding me? They're going to have to offer him $1 billion, which is not, impossible in this day and age. But Seattle's not going to get him. He's going to stay in the West Coast. It'll probably
go to the Dodgers.
It'll probably be the Dodgers. But there is two people by the name of Cohen and Steinbrenner that have very deep pockets and may just go stupid. They might just go stupid because the Mets owner is up there in potential craziness.
All right, so we're an hour 40 in. I think
That was fun, though.
It was a blast. We got to wrap things up. So, closing thoughts, anything that you guys want to plug or promote that you're working on? Albert first.
Yeah, I appreciate having us on. Been a ton of fun. For those in the area, O's had me on a couple of times for his show, The Ozone, on local Tampa market. It's been a lot of fun to do that. If you want to check me out, I have a podcast called It's Not Polite to Ask. We're just getting that
I love the name
running here. It's not
polite to ask. I love it.
That's our show, and appreciate it, man. If you like my stuff, follow me on Twitter or Instagram. It's at the word 0_votes.
I'm good, man. I'm glad to be here, man. I'm OG. I'm old school, man. I want Jack Vita to continue to thrive, and the Jack Vita Show be something special because you really bring a lot of exuberance and knowledge. I mean, the bottom line to this game of baseball now, and all sports, has a combination of true, entertainment, but it also has the dynamics of being on the internet and having to really follow all the nuances of the statistics and the analysis and the analytics. So I think both you guys do a great job of that. I'm just passionate about baseball and passionate about sports. Last thing I'm going to say, tomorrow night, this is as we tape this, it's Tuesday, right? My birthday was yesterday, May 8th. Go O.
Happy birthday, O.
Thank you. I just turned. Last year I turned 60. This year I turned 61. Yeah, you heard me right. And you guys will be using that years from now when you get to that point. Man, you know what? The heck with that I. I'm going to turn that into an E. But tell that one to your dad when you're playing golf, by the way.
Yeah.
But I will say this lastly, tomorrow night, I will be proven right, as he was on my show last week. And I said these words to one Albert Destrade. The Lakers in 5. The Lakers, did I not say that?
You said it.
It's still to be shown. It's still to be shown because they got a big mountain to climb. But the Lakers in 5, that'll make me.
Oh, LeBron must have heard you. He's been hungry, man. I
will be texting both you guys going, yeah, the OG was right.
You're going to make me actually watch an NBA game, O.
Dude, I
haven't watched an NBA game since like 2019.
Get out of here. I am a huge NBA playoffs guy. Regular season, but every now and then I'll catch an interesting game. But I'm glued to it in the playoffs. The storylines are dramatic and they're exciting, and you've seen all the controversy and the chipping and the Dylan Brooks and the thing. It's talk about a soap opera. But I love this baseball season. It's going to be exciting. There's so much parity, so much surprise. We just spent talking about historic teams struggling and young blood teams thriving. It's going to be a fun summer.
All right, we'll do it again in a month, guys. Thanks for coming on.
You got it.
Thanks for having us.
All right, y'all. I hope you all enjoyed our conversation today with Albert Destrade and Orestes Destrade. It's always fun when we have the baseball family here on the show. I always enjoy talking with them. I'm sure we'll do another one of those sometime soon, probably next month. Later this week, I will be back with Survivor winner Danny Boatwright, and we're going to talk some more sports. Probably talk a little bit about the NFL draft, maybe a little baseball news, maybe, just maybe, some college basketball transfer portal news and discussion there as well. We had a great conversation with Danny last week. If you missed it, go back and check it out. We mostly talked about our time on Survivor. We talked about our Christian faith. And in our next episode, it'll be more sports focused. So make sure you guys hit subscribe to the Jack Vita Show, wherever it is that you guys get your podcasts. I'll be back sometime next week for more baseball coverage. I'll share who my guest is later. I have not announced it quite yet, but I actually have to figure it out. But We'll be back next week talking more ball. Until our next episode, you can find us on Jack Vita Show, jackvita.com. There's more content on my website, jackvita.com. I'm going to be writing more there for the time being. And then subscribe on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter is at Jack Vita Show. On Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, that's my at Jack Vita Show. And then YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to the Jack Vita Show so you don't miss out on the great content that we have coming out to you, the listener. Until our next episode, I'm Jack Vita, bringing the dancing lobsters.